Chairman, you can start the meeting. Thank you. Thank you. We've had apologies from Councillor Hay, Councillor Humphrey, Councillor Scolding and Councillor Hewlett.
Thank you very much. That was awesome. We'll go on to item number 2, the previous minutes of our meeting on pages 3 to 10. If there are any comments on those minutes or any amendments need to be made, I will make them now. Councillor Booth, welcome.
Sorry, there was one point on the minutes about the Wiz Beach to March Railway, which I raised about whether the goalposts have been moved. I don't think that's been captured in the minutes. I think I asked the question, so has the government changed the goalposts?
Yep.
I think Mr. Bellamy didn't quite give a direct answer to that, so I said on my interpretations it sounds like they have. So I feel that we ought to record that as an observation.
Yes, thank you very much for that observation. It'll be an ongoing action as well. Thank you. Any other comments or amendments to those minutes? Then I will sign them as a true and correct record of what took place on that particular occasion. Thank you. Thank you. Agenda item number 3 is to report additional items for consideration, which the chairman deems urgent by virtue of the special circumstances being now specified. Are there any, please? Thank you very much. There are none from me. Item 4, members to declare any interest in the local code of conduct in respect of any item to be discussed at the meeting. Again, are there any items, please?
No.
Thank you very much. Item 5, update on previous actions. In your pack, pages 11 to 14. Are there any comments there? Councillor Booth.
There was just one observation about the meeting with Clarion at the last meeting, where there was this issue about the planning permission for the 65 portable homes not being progressed. And I did ask them if they'd applied through a formal pre-application process to get the advice, and they weren't sure at the time. They did say they were going to come back with an answer, but don't think we've received that yet.
No, we haven't received any information on that, so that's still ongoing. Yeah, thank you for that. Anybody else? No.
Yeah,
Councillor Scammers, sorry.
yeah. What in brief is the relationship between Fenland District Council and Peterborough City Council in the review of the planning? It's ongoing. Is there any further update on that?
Not to my knowledge, Amy. No?
No, there isn't this meeting, but we do have reports that come periodically.
Right, okay. So that will remain as an ongoing action.
Okay.
Thank you for that. Thank you. We'll proceed to item number 6, and we welcome Paul Med, Chief Executive, and Chris Bowden, Leader of the Council. And it is the draft business plan 2023-24. Do you wish to make a presentation to start with, Councillor Bowden?
Yes, may I first of all suggest that the members of the Cabinet be invited.
Indeed, please gather around. That's fine. Thank you.
Make it easier than them jumping up and down whenever their turn to answer a question comes up. Right, thank you, Chairman. This is an annual meeting that we have to discuss the proposals which we have in front of us for the draft business plan for the following year. And there is a great deal of continuity between the draft business plan for 22-23 and the proposed draft business plan for 23-24. The great value, as far as I'm concerned, of this meeting isn't merely to challenge what is in this draft business plan, but to give alternatives to allow us to think further, because this is not the final version of the draft business plan. And I'm very open to any suggestions about how the emphasis that we've put in this draft business plan between various priorities, how that emphasis may be changed, or even if some of the priorities need to be changed. So please don't hesitate to ask questions which do challenge what is in this draft business plan. There have been a lot of changes over the course of the last 12 months since we last met. And the whole environment, the financial environment and the political environment are very different now from what they were like 12 months ago. And particularly on the financial side, we have to accept that we're in a position at the moment of high, but one hopes temporary inflation, which has its effect on our finances and therefore has its effect on what our business plan has to state. But we also have to recognize the effect that there will be of the transformational changes that we are talking about as far as this council is concerned, and the way in which we will be preserving front-facing services whilst reducing our costs in various ways. And that's going to be a very important transitional process that we'll be going through in the next 3 or 4 years. And that's why we do have a new section in the business plan, which is Council for the Future. And it is to allow part of that to be circularized and to be debated and to be part of our business plan. The person who is responsible from the office, from the member side in overseeing the wording of the business plan itself and the way in which it's presented is Councillor Tierney. And I have to say that I think that year on year, the business plan gets easier to read in terms of its legibility. And for that, I'm grateful both to Councillor Tierney and to officers. And it may be appropriate for Councillor Tierney just to say a few words about the way in which the business plan has been set out this time, and the way in which we hope it's more user-friendly for the purposes that I mentioned before. The business plan is, of course, out for public consultation, and we will listen very carefully indeed to the responses that we get, because I have to say, I'm all in favour of improving the draft business plan if there are any ways of improving it. So I think that's it. Thank you very much indeed, Chairman.
Councillor Tierney, do you wish to comment?
I won't add very much, Chairman, simply to say the officers have done, as always, an exemplary job of putting this together. I don't have to be anywhere near as involved as I did at the start, because they know what's required, which is it should be clean, easy to read, have enough detail, but not too much detail, and be plain English rather than jargon. And that's what we always push for. And I think it's presented in exactly that way.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I think on the previous occasion, I did actually compliment you on the way things are set out now. And I think it's been a well worth exercise. So thank you for that. And in particular, the workload of Phil Hughes. As far as I'm concerned, we were, I thought, going to get a grant officer in place. Was that the case during the current year?
That is a matter which is more appropriate for the head of paid service to answer.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. So I think 2 points within what you've just raised. The first one is that Phil Hughes isn't dedicated to the economic priority. Obviously, we have a dedicated economic growth team. It is fair to say that quite a bit of Phil's work contributes directly, indirectly to or within that priority, but he isn't one of the economic growth members of the economic growth team as such. The second point about a dedicated grant funding officer. Many years ago, the council did have such a person, and then obviously austerity bit, and we had to sort of cut our cloth accordingly. And we changed our emphasis in terms of how we pursue external funding, and that's now embedded into officers' roles within different teams. It was felt that we didn't have the resource or luxury to have a dedicated role. And I think it's worth saying that since that post was disestablished, we have had a significant degree of success in terms of embedding that into officers' day-to-day activity. And the proof in the pudding in that regard is the amount of external funding that we have been able to successfully leverage into the council over the past number of years.
Sorry, yeah, I'm not criticising Phil Hughes at all. In fact, I think he's done a very good job. But I do think he's under a lot of pressure in many directions, and a grant officer would have been probably an asset to help him source out extra funding.
Yeah, Chairman, are we not going through an order? Because I think the first priority is actually communities in the document, and we've also got the foreword. It's just we're jumping around the document that way. Okay. Well, I was just suggesting we've obviously got the foreword, then we go into priorities about communities. What's the next one? Environment. Then it goes into economy. So. Yeah. Yes, Chairman. I guess one of the points I'd just like to make is we have a long running discussion with Councillor Hoy about number of empty properties. And I wonder if what we should, was it page 24/7 of the plan, if we ought to say it should be a net decrease in number of empty properties, just to make it a little bit clearer. Yeah. Okay. That was my main point. Then the other point, Chairman, if I can, it's just around, I think with communities, we've said in the past that there was the emphasis on vulnerable members, which is appropriate. But I think the point I've been trying to make is to just support the communities at whole. I think we've now got there's an item there, support community groups to hold safe and successful public events, which I think is right. An observation on that is, that any support or advice, we make sure it's proportionate, so that, we're not overburdening with red tape people holding these events. I know, having been involved in a few, sometimes the red tape, it feels like you're almost drowning in all the paperwork you've got to do, and you don't rely on people's experience and the volunteers that they've got to help. So I think that's just something we need to probably just reflect on, and maybe just address the word in there around that, I would have said.
Councillor, you want to comment on that? Yeah, okay. If we could, yes, Councillor Scanlon.
Thank you, Chairman. One of the things we have to be careful of, and I agree with Councillor Booth that the red tape, we can drown in red tape on all events. But I think one thing we have to be careful of is we don't look at the red tape and get the things in place. It could leave this council open to someone suing us for something that's gone wrong that we haven't looked at. So I think it's something that we have to be very careful of and not totally ignore the red tape, because it could come back and bite us. So I agree with Councillor Booth that we do need to look at it, but I also agree with Councillor Hoy that yes, we do look at it, and we should be very careful what we look at.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Booth.
I think the key word there is proportionate. So we're making sure that it's fit for purpose. It's not one size fits all, basically.
I'd like to make general comments on leisure centres, if I may, when we're talking about communities. I think you all know my views that I feel the leisure centres are deteriorating. There's no proper maintenance programme in place, which I believe would be the responsibility now of Freedom Leisure Limited. They don't appear to have the resource to maintain our leisure centres as I would want. And an example that I can bring up at Whittlesey, and the leader has actually been round with me at the Manor Leisure Centre, and quite frankly, behind the scenes, it's a disgrace. The general state of the buildings have deteriorated over the last 50 years, not been maintained properly, and I don't believe that Freedom Leisure have the capabilities at the moment to do anything about it. I was officiating at Straw Bear on Saturday at the Manor Leisure Centre in preparation for the parade, and we've actually got a hole in the roof of the main hall with water dripping down. Now that is unacceptable, completely unacceptable. I think we all know about the elephant in the room with Freedom Leisure, and the council have been quite right in bailing them out financially again. But from my point of view, it's all very well bailing them out financially, but what are we doing about the maintenance of our buildings in the future? How are we going to cope with that, particularly if Freedom Leisure should fold in this particular part of the world? If there's any comment on that, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you very much indeed. I trust, because I'm not aware of it myself, but I trust that that has been reported, that leak has been reported, and that officers are aware of it. I trust that's the case. If not, I'm sure that it will be taken from this meeting, because clearly situations like that cannot be allowed to continue for any length of time whatsoever. More generally than that, you are quite correct, Chairman, in identifying that Freedom Leisure have faced significant difficulties over the course of the last 3 years. It is now, it has been said, 2 years and 10 months. The period of COVID has created significant difficulties for them, and the recovery from it hasn't been as rapid as might have been hoped, although it is more rapid than was projected. So there continue to be problems, and those problems have only been exacerbated by the increases in costs that there have been, particularly so far as utilities are concerned. So we have to be quite careful in the way in which we interact with Freedom Leisure. But ultimately, Freedom Leisure must fulfil their part of the contractual arrangements which exist between the council and Freedom Leisure. And I completely agree with you, Chairman. It's going to be necessary for those matters to be raised directly with Freedom Leisure to ensure that where they do have responsibilities, they are fulfilling them. It's a difficult time right at the moment, but we can't allow this to continue indefinitely, because if it does, we'll get to a situation where we will face enormous amounts of potential liability, which unfortunately Freedom Leisure may not be in a position to fulfill. So we do need to get on top of that, I agree. But where there are immediate issues, such as you gave an example, water dripping down into the main hall, they need to be dealt with absolutely immediately.
Councillor Brett, followed by Councillor Scanlon, sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, just on the point about Freedom Leisure and maintenance, wasn't part of the original agreement that the district council would still undertake certain items of maintenance, and then the day-to-day maintenance would be down to Freedom Leisure. So effectively the capital expenditure, or large capital expenditure, would be from the district council.
Yes, thank you for your question, Councillor Booth. You are entirely correct, and there is a very clear distinction, and because I can't give that clear distinction, that's why I was using the wording I was using very carefully indeed, so that I was distinguishing between what is the responsibility of Freedom Leisure and what's our responsibility. I can't say off the top of my head exactly where that lies without getting further advice from officers on any particular issue. But yes, you are completely correct. There is a division of responsibility between the two parties, depending upon the nature of the particular item concerned.
Yeah.
As a chief executive, got anything to add to that? Because I can see you nodding. I just wondered if you can add any clarity, or is that something we can follow up with after the meeting?
That you made, and yeah, to confirm, we will follow up to provide further information in respect of the differentiation between the sort of ongoing day-to-day repairs and maintenance, basic repairs and maintenance, cleanliness, as opposed to the kind of bigger ticket capital issues. So we'll go away and look precisely at the contract, and we can provide a summary of where that line falls, if you like.
Again, come back in.
And I think this comes back to the point I've raised several times, is around, we've entered into a new arena of effectively having suppliers managing assets for us. And are we happy we've got a robust supplier management process to ensure that, these issues that, that Councillor Mason's raised today are being dealt with in a timely manner, and everyone's aware of what needs to be done to resolve it.
So my response to that would be yes. I mean, inevitably with any physical building, there will be ongoing repair and maintenance issues. I think members will be aware of the fact that this council has invested a significant amount of money in the past to bring all our 4 leisure facilities up to a reasonable level. But the starting point was that 3 of them were pretty sort of old buildings. So inevitably, there will be ongoing challenges associated with that. I think where examples of leaky roofs are concerned, obviously, it's the first I've heard of it today. And I think Councillor Bowden quite rightly stated that where there are such issues that clearly can have an impact on the fabric of the building, but more so an impact on customers using the building, that needs to be swiftly reported and corrective action needs to be taken as soon as possible. I think that stands to reason, doesn't it?
Councillor Scanlon and then Councillor Wicks.
Thank you very much, Chairman. One of the things that's come up from what Councillor Booth has just asked, when was the last inspection of these premises carried out by Fenland District Council officers, the building assets people? After all, they are our assets. We've merely contracted out to Freedom Leisure, and we need to understand the state of those buildings. One has obviously failed in one point with a hole in the roof. So when was the last inspection carried out by Fenland District Council assessors?
Councillor Clark isn't here to be able to give a more detailed answer. And one of the purposes of your holding a pre-meet a week beforehand is to give us notice of questions like that, whether they're very specific questions, we're not necessarily in a position to give an answer straight off the top of our heads. Nevertheless, it's a very relevant question, so we'll ensure that an answer is given to all members of the overview and scrutiny panel within the next couple of days.
Councillor Wicks, I think, had the next question.
My question relates to the matter that you've brought up and effective communications between Freedom Leisure and this council in reporting the faults that have been indicated this afternoon. It seems like there's a process that has, shall we say, slipped between a crack here, and it is against that background that I asked the question.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Just because I, as leader, don't know what's happening doesn't mean to say that the process hasn't been followed. We don't know. The first that I've heard about it, in fact, the first the Chief Executive has heard about it, is the question which has just been raised today. If we'd been asked an hour ago about this, we'd be able to give an answer to that. And I hope the answer would be that, yes, this has been reported by Freedom Leisure to us and appropriate action is being taken. I can't honestly give that answer because I haven't had notice, so I haven't been able to ask the correct officers that particular question. So I very much hope the suggestion that you're making, Councillor Wicks, is wrong. It's quite correct for you to ask the question, and that will be responded to in the next couple of days to all members of the O&S panel.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Booth.
Yes, Chairman, I just want to make a point about, having the questions from pre-meet. So pre-meet's there to aid in development of questions, but the line of questioning could actually generate more questions. And that's the whole point about this conversation. So you're never going to have full list of all the questions. As I think Councillor Scanlon said, following the question I raised, that raised his question. So, we just need to be mindful of that. I just wonder if we ought to maybe have, all the relevant officers here. Now, we don't want half the council in here, but is there any information from any of the officers sitting at the side of the room that might be able to assist with the line of questioning?
Thank you, Chairman. And yes, Councillor Booth, you're entirely correct. there has to be the opportunity for follow-up questions to take place. There has to be free-flowing dialogue. But where a member has a particular issue that they know that they're going to raise at the meeting, even just letting the chief executive know an hour or two before the meeting can allow those questions to be answered in a better way than I've been able to answer them today. But nevertheless, what you're saying is entirely correct, that it is perfectly reasonable for any questions to be asked. However, so far as having a lot of officers here is concerned, and it's something which we'd like to avoid where possible, what we do have are officers present who are able to answer questions to the agenda items which we've got in front of us. And here we're talking about the draft business plan. And that's not, it wouldn't have been anticipated that the particular officers concerned who would be relevant to that question would be answering questions like that, because it's not really directly to do with what's in the draft business plan.
Oh,
Yeah, the leader's kind of stolen the point I was going to make. I mean, no, absolutely not. These are all highly relevant questions in terms of the operational management of our leisure service. So it's really good that they're being raised. And of course, you know, if there's a leaking roof, that can't wait for the portfolio session with yourself in three months' time. But I think the essence, Chairman, of today's meeting is for you to ask us questions about the priorities that are set out within the business plan. If there are sort of more operational matters, well, by all means, raise them outside of this particular committee meeting. And of course, officers will go away and look at those urgently and come back to you with a response.
yes.
Sorry, Chairman, just kind of listening to this, and I was thinking about some of what's been said. And it seems to me that we don't actually know. We perhaps are being a bit unfair because we don't know that the hole in the roof, for instance, didn't happen or wasn't identified the day that you spotted it. And we don't know that it hasn't already been booked in for repair since then, because we just don't know, do we? So unless you're saying that you've seen it for a month or two in the past and it hasn't been attended to, this kind of seems like we've gone a bit outside the box and perhaps gone a bit ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, I'll take the point. I mean, the Statley was an example, just an example of the state of the Manor Leisure Centre in Whittlesea. And the leader does know, as well as anybody else, the general state of repair there. It is really a disgrace. And I know from personal experience with Whittlesea Food Aid, when we moved in there, what we had to do to bring it up to standard. And I will make a slight apology on behalf of the committee for the lack of notice of the questions. Unfortunately, at our pre-meet, the members there are exactly the same members that are here now, plus one. We do have the problem internally of actually putting together questions for the panel in a timely manner. I do take the leader's point that even an hour or so before could be appropriate. So my apologies there for the lack of notice. That is purely down to, may I say, a lack of commitment of some of the members of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Are there any more questions on the communities before we move on? Councillor Scanlon.
In a way, this is an apology. This committee doesn't wish to come across as ambushing you. And if that's the feeling that we are ambushing you, it would be apologise on our behalf. It's only trying to be helpful, which is what we're trying to do.
Yes.
I think that the question that you raised is a really important one, and we must make sure that it either has been addressed already, or if it hasn't been addressed, it's addressed immediately. So it's a perfectly valid point to make. It was just that if there is an opportunity for an operational matter such as that to be brought particularly to the chief executive's attention just a couple of hours before a meeting such as this, then we can actually give you a better answer that we've managed to do today.
Good point, yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. If we can move on to another section of the business plan.
Environment.
Yeah, environment will be the next one. Comments on that one, please, panel? All right, I'll kick off then, if you don't mind. Again, one of my issues, as far as the environment is concerned, is antisocial behaviour, and how we're actually tackling that particular question. And I think that was in the pre-meet questions. We have a problem locally in Whittlesea, I'm not sure about the other Fenland towns, of a lack of youth provision, for example. And I do feel that we have no policy on youth provision in this council. If we had, then probably some of the antisocial behaviour problems could be solved. That's just a comment I make from the chair. If anybody wishes to come back on that, I'll be obliged.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you for some of the advanced notice of that question. For example, one of the things that we get is we get highlighted areas where antisocial behaviour is particularly prevalent, and then we have a problem-solving group that particularly looks at their youth concerns have been brought up and advice has been given. It's not all about enforcement, as in cracking down on the offending behaviour. As you say, sometimes that behaviour may not be there in the first place if adequate youth provision was provided. I've been a counsellor since 2009, and one of the things I was told about was there's nothing for the children to do back in 2009, and you hear that on occasion. But when I look round at what was on offer to the youths of today compared to what was on offer to when I was a youth, and I didn't go around breaking up things, I don't exactly chime with that. It would be better if we all had everything that we ever wanted, but I think we often look outside of our own areas for somewhere to lay blame, and I don't think that's entirely fair that there is nothing for the youngsters to do. But going back to the actual role of the district council, the community safety partnership, and what we can do about that, as we say, when we hear about problematic areas, we put together a problem-solving group, look at that area. One of the things we would look at in that area is what is there in terms of youth provision. We engage with relevant partners. One of the examples I give is Centre 33 on hate concern. Youth workers heavily involved with that, early help, etc., made aware. We've got arrangements with our partners such as the police. We've been looking recently, knife crime on the more serious end, the knife crime, the county lines presentations put forward into the schools as a partnership. And anyone that hasn't seen, you know, the video on county lines, that was a particularly good explanation for something that I personally hadn't really appreciated, just the level they want to. We're working with other partners. I'll give you a list of a few: Blackfield Creatives, Clarion Housing, Clarion Futures, local schools, of course, and the police to develop creative and engaging ways to divert young people from adult social behaviour. And one of the other areas that is quite concerning is perception. Perception is not always the same as the actual reality in some areas, and sometimes we've got to help with the perception, the fear of antisocial behaviour as opposed to the actual prevalence. I don't have the figures in front of me, but Fenland is a great place to live. You know, our crime rates, our antisocial behaviour rates in Fenland is far lower than many places in the country. But sometimes for the local people that see any antisocial behaviour, that's still not good enough. And of course, we're here to do what we can. So I hope that helps to some degree, Chair.
Yes, it does actually, and you're quite right what you say about engagement with people. Many years ago now, my wife and I ran a youth group for 6 years. And it was all about engaging the young people and finding them projects to do and really take them off the streets almost, for want of a better term. I just feel at the moment that we don't seem to have that same youth policy, that same youth provision. And it's something that floats by without too much concern. We did have funding put aside at one stage, 125,000 left out of the Wiltshire Heritage Fund for youth provision. And I was very hopeful that would be matched by the Youth Initiatives Fund at Cambridge County Council, which possibly could have given £250,000 to Whipplesea for youth provision. Now, unfortunately, that was withdrawn for other reasons, and that money diverted elsewhere. And I just feel that we're missing the point, really, that we have a lot of people in Fenland who are really committed to helping young people. They do need professional help. They do need some guidance. And I don't feel we actually provide that guidance or signpost in the right direction. But that is only a personal comment. But thank you, Councillor Kant, for your observations there.
Thank you, Chairman. I agree with what Councillor Count said. The perception from some individuals in the press make out we live in a third world society that is rife with knife crime and everything else, because that makes a good story for them. And I agree with Councillor Count that we do need to do a little bit more. We always need to do a little bit more. And I think he's right in this. The perception is that from certain individuals that we are in a bad way. And quite frankly, we're not. We just need to up our game a little bit to encourage the youngsters to join these groups, to look at their future and see where they want to go, and not go down the criminality route, which will eventually blight their life for the rest of their life. So yes, we do need more youth provision. It's getting the funding to do that and encouraging the youngsters to actually participate. And that is always the difficult thing. If the youngsters don't want to participate, they want to hang around on street corners, which is not good for them. I know when I was a youngster, if you hung around on a street corner, you had a policeman come and clip you around the ear roll until you'd go home. They can't do that now. So it's a case of encouraging the youths to better themselves and not leave it to chance.
Thank you for that, Councillor Person.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah. And it strikes me as been a little bit strange really, when people turn around and say there's nothing to do around town or antisocial behaviour and what have you. We've got an absolutely fantastic facility in March, in Young People March. And I have to say that every time I come past there, even if the actual place itself is closed, there's always youngsters in there playing football and what have you and having the time of their lives. And as I understand it, I know the people I'm actually on the board, well, so the board, one of the trustees in there, and I often pop my head around the corner and have a word with the people in there. And there's the amount of facilities in there with the drugs counselling and the general counselling. And people turn around and say, well, there's nowhere for them to go, they're playing computer games. They've got a whole big arena up there of computers and that things, and the kids actually have a bit of a problem getting on these computers because they're always actually in use. And take it a step further outside there, the skateboard park in West End Park is always in use. I mean, people say to me, oh, doesn't it get a bit noisy for you? No, it doesn't get noisy. You get used to noise because in fact, you actually think it's a bit quiet tonight because nothing's actually happening in the skateboard park. It never happens. The little youths, the little children's park in West End Park is always in use. And they've also got the new skate, Council French will be able to tell me on this one, skate bowl park, the new one that's actually going to be happening soon. I think that's going to be a big asset to that area because that's going to be so well used on that. If we take the other bits in consideration, I think we're actually, well, certainly in March, I'm not too sure about other areas in Fenland, but we're so fortunate and so lucky having all these facilities, and they're always in use. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for that comment, Councillor Cohen.
Thank you for bringing me back in, Chairman, because I'd like to bring some points to light, but also I think you've given me something of some work to do, which I hope to have a look at it and take forward. I'll come on to that in a moment. First thing I would say, so I had a presentation from a group that wanted to bid into the police funding, and we fully endorsed their bid to do that sort of thing. And they did work with very low budgets, but some personnel to deliver it, such as a couple of balls and some hoops, and deliver some of these schemes in going in outreach around the areas. It was very supportive. I'll try and find out where they're getting with their bid. It wasn't a bid towards us, it was a bid towards the police, but we'll see what to do. But just, and forgive me if I spin a March bent on this, but you know, the fact is I live here, so I know certain things. So Council French is bringing forward the BMX park on West End. Right, so that is going to be a new thing when that's delivered. That'll be a fantastic new asset. That is to add on to the recently refurbished skate park in March, the skate bowl in March. The rugby down at Long Hill is going phenomenal now with the amount of youth participation of all ages. In fact, they go right up until walking rugby at an older age, kickboxing in March, boxing in March, youth people March, table tennis tables that were new since I was a youth. In West End Park, over at Wiz Beach, the one that I'm aware of is the water park that you've the splash park, which is just something for families getting engaged. So the one thing that I'm bringing out of all of this is the fact that there is a lot out there, but until you stop and think about it, you're not maybe aware of what there is. And one of the items of work that I think you've highlighted for me is perhaps parents aren't also aware, and it'd be useful. Recently, I had to do a job on licensing of taxis because we were aware in March there was such a lack of a dearth of taxis, Friday night, Saturday night, weekends, etc. And one of the things we discovered on that journey was there was a lot more taxis and private hire out there than people like I and other people were aware of. And I think it'd be good for me to do and liaise with the portfolio holder for provision to try and do some sort of mapping exercise that could be made easily available to parents if it doesn't already exist. So if somebody's got a child of a certain age and they say there's nothing out there, perhaps there's something we can post and say, this is the whole range of things, and not, you know, computers for some people, outside sports for other, basket weaving. Who knows? I've got nothing against basket weaving, but there's something out there for everyone. And it'd be a great scheme to actually see if we could map some of that and make it easily accessible. So thank you for that question.
Sounds very encouraging in March. I think Councillor Mrs French wants to follow that up.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, obviously, Councillor Count and Councillor Purser has highlighted a lot of the things, but something that you may or may not know, at county council level, we have officers specifically for all the towns. I had a meeting with two of them last week, and they're always there available. And you know that there's loads of things that they can help these groups with, and money is available. Part of the meeting I had last week was with the owner of the kickboxing club in March. Many people may or may not know. This gentleman started this off in the middle of the pandemic. He's been going now, I think, 3.5 years. We're trying to help him fund because he's now taken on an additional unit next to him. So we're trying to get the funding for that. But he took his team, I can't remember how many there were, to the championships last year, and they won so many medals. And these kids start at the age of 5, and it's not just males, it's females. And you know, if you haven't been there, I would suggest that you know you go up there and see it. And he puts sessions on every day. Yeah, picking up on the BMX track, yes, this is something I've been working on for I think 10 years. It was very, very fortunate. We have a couple of gentlemen who sit on the committee with the help and support of county council officers. With regard to this, we do have 2 lots of funding, 50,000 from 2 people. Believe it or not, we're short of about £4,000 for the planning application. We didn't realise we needed planning. So that is being worked on at this time. But there are so many things for people to do in March, the youngsters. And I have to say, it does annoy us slightly when they say there's nothing to do. You've got your, I don't know, Steve probably knows the answer. There's about 24 football teams in March. Yeah. And that includes, so, you know, and young people of March. So there's lots and lots of help out there. The skateboard, just to pick up Councillor Purser's, the skateboard is remaining. We're not going to fill it in. We are having this. We've seen the plans for it. As I say, we just need to get planning permission. So, you know, it's something the youth, and of course the other thing is we're getting a new extension to the park, which was promised to us in 2002, 2003, 20 years ago. So there is a lot going on in March, and I'm sure there is right across the whole of the district.
Yeah. I think Councillor Wicks and then Councillor Purser, Councillor Booth, Councillor Wicks.
Yeah. I feel I should make comments about the youth activities in Whittlesea and the number of very successful clubs that we have for the youth within Whittlesea. Army Cadets, Scouts, Cubs, Venture Scouts, judo, football, and I can keep on going. You know, there is a provision there, and it shouldn't be neglected. That yes, and we should be encouraging them if they do need money to actually go to the right channels to be able to support. It isn't just one solution fits it all. As you well know, the police were involved with the youth hanging out at the Mountain Leisure Centre a number of years ago and tried to address the matter. It's an ongoing problem that we have within Whittlesea. So we haven't found a solution yet. So we've got to keep on working at it.
Yeah, I agree to that. Councillor Purser, Ms. Scanlon, I think next, was that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think one thing that, again, we've been going through all the different clubs and societies and things in the area. One that is actually quite close to my heart for many, many reasons. I'm vice president down there, and they're totally self-funded. Don't get any government grants or anything like that, as I understand it. I'm sure that people on the bench there will correct me if I'm wrong. It's the Marchtown Cricket Club. Now, I actually went down there a little while ago in my capacity as deputy mayor, because I had a think they called it a youth festival down there, 3-day festival, training up the youngsters from very, very young to the teenagers. And they're having an absolute whale of a time. The place was absolutely packed. And so again, it's something that's, it needs to be, in a funny sort of way, it needs to be broadcast, really, isn't it? It's the fact that these things are actually there. And I think that's probably the worst kept secret, the fact that these things aren't broadcast, really. I'm not just talking about the cricket club, but the football club, the rugby club, as I say, everything. If they're not broadcast, then people say, there's nothing to do. There is things to do if you just open your eyes. I actually used, for a chap that I was talking to today, and he said there's nothing to do in town. I said, aren't you into horse racing? So he said, well, yes. I said, well, if you take off those blinkers you've got on there, you'll see all these things that are out there, and you'll be amazed at the things that are going on. And I think that's fairly relevant in all of this. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to pass this back to officers and give them a job. With all these activities that are taking place in all the towns, Paul will probably kill me for this, get an officer to collate all that information and put it on the Fenland website. Send it to the town councils so that everyone is aware. Someone in Whittlesea may want to deal with someone in Wisbeach so that they know all the activities that are going on in Fenland. We've had it extolled the virtues of all those activities, from kickboxing to judo to everything else. Out of my league at the moment, but I think that information, the officers could collate all that information and put it in the public domain. And I think that would be a great asset to Fenland as a whole.
Thank you. Councillor Bowden.
Well, I think this discussion and the comment just made by Councillor Miscanton, following the comment which was made by Councillor Count, has been extremely helpful. Let me bring us back to the draft business plan, which is what we're meant to be talking about. And I think that it's entirely appropriate for us to amend the draft business plan so that we do ensure that that is something that we do in the course of the next year, and that we act effectively to give better information to residents, not merely in their own town or village, but throughout the whole of Fenland, about what is available, how to contact people. It makes a great deal of sense. So it's a prime example of what it was that I said at the very beginning of this debate, Chairman, about the value of discussion which can inform what we should put into our draft business plan. And I think that's a superb example.
That's very useful. Thank you. Councillor.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about that, Chairman. So I know it sounds good, and there's certainly some kudos in having a kind of youth central part of the website that does all the things that have been specified. It's very difficult to do because you can't keep it up to date, because you're talking about multiple private organisations that are constantly changing, appearing, disappearing, changing management, changing what they do. It becomes a very major job to keep it up to date. And as soon as 2 months have passed, half of it will be out of date and useless, and people will be following links to nothing. So I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. I'm simply saying that we should have a think about how it might work and how best to present it before just committing ourselves to what is actually quite a big ongoing task. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Very little to say now. I think between Councillor Tierney and Councillor Bowden have said essentially what I was going to say, that it's something to take away and certainly review. Obviously, we have a much improved website. I think Councillor Tierney sets out some practical challenges, but it is certainly something we can look at. We've kind of got a directory type approach. So we'll review it and see how it might operate effectively, how it might operate practically.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. Councillor Booth, please, and Councillor Wicks.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of observations. I mean, Councillor Count made the point about crime statistics. We have to take that with a pinch of salt because that is reported crime. And I believe the last Inspectorate of Cambridgeshire Constabulary highlighted the issue around how they engage with the public. And I certainly get comments that, you know, people don't bother reporting antisocial behavioural crime because, you know, all they get sent is a number and nothing ever happens to it. So we need to bear that in mind. The second question or observation is, I think this is currently in the environment portfolio for some reason. To me, it sounds like it should actually be in communities. Just an observation.
Yeah, I think it was coming across to me because the community safety element was why it was coming over to me, and then I spread myself into the sort of what sports and pastime provision there was there, just to cover off the angle of antisocial behaviour existing youngsters because they've got nothing better to do, and I really wanted to put a cap on that sort of conversation and lens from right from the outside, right from the outset. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Swix, you have a point.
Apology, I'll put down youth activity fair. Now, this is something each of the market towns and some of the rural areas can do. You know, the database within Fenland, very laudable, but again, within our own back door, we do have the control of destiny within the area. Moving on from that and more to the community safety partnership, one of the things is that I know the questionnaire is basically dictated by the Home Office, but it neglects rural areas and highlights the problems we have within rural areas. And that is something I think that should come out, that the rural areas do need to be highlighted of the issues they've got, whether it was rural crime. You know, there is a whole myriad of crimes that are committed in the rural areas that aren't committed within the urban areas. And that's the point that I would make.
Give it that. Councillor Kane.
Yes, thank you. And I absolutely and 110% agree with you on this one, Councillor Wicks. One of the things I've been doing at the meetings with the Police and Crime Commissioner that we're, you know, I'm involved with, and with the various is when we end up having everything directed at data sets, and the data sets are very, very broad strokes. So from the government, they say, oh, right, we'll deal with Cambridgeshire. And then Cambridgeshire says, well, we'll have a look at Cambridgeshire. And they don't particularly, in a lot of areas, break it down further and say, we'll look at Fenland, as opposed to, we have different needs here in Fenland to Peterborough City or Cambridge City. But again, there's that secondary breakdown as well, the rural areas versus the urban areas. One of the things I've been doing and arguing for a long while was when we had the introduction of the rural task force that dealt with things like stealing of a £1 million tractor. You know, when that wasn't about for that period because it was taken away and came back, the average bobby on the beat went up, got told a tractor got stolen, he put it very low down on his priorities. When they understood the tractor was worth, you know, so many hundreds of thousands of pounds or upwards, and the people who were involved in those communities understood it's a very different thing. The knock-on effects of hare coursing, it's not just the hares on the day, it's all the associated behaviours. So I've been very keen in all my discussions to point out and bring forward the discussions on rural crime being slightly different to urban crime, and trying to say that you can't just have broad brush strokes, you've got to use your data sets and break them down to see where we're more effective. So fully aware of that, and thank you for your comments, and I'll keep up with the work on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. If we exhausted that particular section, we come to quality. Sorry, Councillor Bowden.
Thank you. My apologies for interrupting, Chairman. Given that you've just exhausted that particular section, may I just go back to the previous one? Because if I'd had my wits fully about me, I'd have realised that without Councillor Clark here, we weren't able to give the answer which had actually been prepared to a slightly different question which had been asked. And it would be, I think, helpful for me to read that out, if you don't mind, to do with the maintenance of leisure centres. A SIPFA planned preventative maintenance report was commissioned by FDC in late 2021, and this work replaces a prior report from 2018. FDC has set aside considerable sums in the capital budget over the coming 2 years to implement recommendations that are FDC's responsibility within the report. It should be noted that Freedom Leisure are responsible for day-to-day works, including any works that are under FDC's capital threshold of £10,000. Some of the identified works are already completed, including extensive roofing works at the Hudson Centre, roofing works at the George Campbell, and guttering works at the Manor. Replacement of the Hudson fire alarm is a project that is underway, with other projects due to start in spring 2023, including electrical wiring works at the Hudson and changing room works at the Manor and George Campbell. Grant funding is usually available for larger capital improvement or new build projects, but not maintenance works. Where such projects take place within leisure centres, funders will be approached to reduce costs to FDC where possible. Just thought that might be helpful, Chairman.
That is very helpful. Thank you very much indeed for that. Thank you. Very reassuring. Thank you. We'll move on to quality organisation. Are there any comments? Beg your pardon? Yeah, my vice chairman reminds me that the economy should be discussed first. Okay, I'm diving around on the agenda a little bit. Any comments from the panel on the economy? Councillor Scanlon.
The first item in the economy is to attract new business, jobs and opportunities and supporting their existing businesses. What is being done to attract more businesses? I know of one business that's actually been attracted into Fenland. How is it progressing and growing?
Chairman, unfortunately for domestic reason, it's not been possible for Councillor Benny to be present today. So again, some notice was given of a question rather similar to the question which has just been asked by Councillor Miscantlon. And if I can respond to that, the advice given to Councillor Benny, then it may be helpful. Particularly looking at what's happened in the last 4 years. I don't know the particular business, unfortunately, that is being referred to by Councillor Miscantlon, and I probably wouldn't want to talk about one particular business in an open O&S meeting. But as far as the encouragement of businesses into the area is concerned and what's been done over the last 4 years, the economic growth team was newly appointed in 2020, immediately in place prior to the COVID pandemic, resulting in various national lockdowns. Working closely with Councillor Benny as economic growth portfolio holder, the team are wedded to achieving economic growth and prosperity in the area. It is widely acknowledged that economic growth is more likely to result from businesses which are already in the area rather than as a result of new inward investment. The team have refreshed the economic growth strategy, which has subsequently been endorsed by Cabinet and Council, reflecting the context we now have post-pandemic, ensuring that the focus of the team is business engagement. We've also put in place various performance measures against the strategy, which are reported via the portfolio holder update reports to Council to ensure the positive impact the team have is both measurable and quantifiable. The economic growth team have devised and implemented with member approval the discretionary business rate relief scheme targeted at businesses considering moving into the Fenland area, therefore providing an incentive to our area. In addition, the team have also launched a further business rate relief policy targeted at developers of industrial units to kickstart developments in the district, as we have a limited supply of these units locally, potentially limiting inward investment opportunities and, for that matter, expansion of existing businesses within the area. The economic growth team have worked with colleagues in the planning service to devise and implement a fast-track planning application process for applications that will support employment in the area. The team has worked closely with the combined authority Start Grow initiative, which provides grants to start-up and micro businesses across Fenland. The scheme concluded in December 2022, and the total grant award figures are currently being finalised and will be shared with Overview and Scrutiny Committee during your next meeting in February. The team has run an external workshop event at the Boathouse in relation to skills and recruitment, as this has been a recurring theme identified by local businesses that they are finding challenging. The team worked closely with the CPCA GrowthWorks inward investment team, responding to queries and engaging with businesses considering a move into Fenland. One of the key notable successes in this regard has been the turmeric company that moved into Fenland in 2022 from outside the area, resulting in additional local employment opportunities. The team played a key part in the COVID business grants project team, ensuring businesses were sustainable during the pandemic. Furthermore, FDC has also recently been successful in relation to the Shared Prosperity Fund bid via the combined authority from central government, and a key aspect of that bid is in relation to business grants, as can be mentioned further if you wish to talk about it more. More generally, the team engage with businesses both new to the area and those which are more established to identify any support required, acting as a conduit for external funding, energy advice and support, as well as skills and recruitment, and take a very proactive approach, ensuring that businesses continue to regard Fenland as a vibrant and supportive environment in which to be located. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. Echoing Councillor Scanlon's comments, really, I think we're looking more at how we're going to support businesses that are already established in the area in the coming months. And I particularly have had approaches from people in the hospitality sector who are very fearful now about going forward in 2023, and perhaps they're looking for concrete support. So thank you for that statement. Thank you. Councillor Wicks, thank you.
Having worked with the business development officer and pointed him in a number of directions over his tenure for the council, it is not only Wisbech that needs the help. There are the other market towns, and I would, in this, come to Whittlesey in March in particular. Small business units, I am continually getting my ear bent about the lack of small business units within the area. And it's against that background where we have got to encourage employment within Fenland to stop it becoming a more and more dormitory part of the area, that I ask the question of how much effort is actually going into making these small business units available, and that is through development and existing stock.
Councillor Bowden, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. And that's a very, very valid question. It's extremely helpful that you've asked it, Councillor Wicks, because you've hit the nail on the head there. There is a clear shortage in Fenland of small business, particularly industrial units. There's a particular shortage as far as that's concerned. And there are only so many things in which we can do. First of all, we can actually build some more small industrial units ourselves. And we had a plan to do so at the Chatteris Business Centre. And I have to say that, unfortunately, over the course of the last 9 months, construction costs have actually absolutely gone through the roof, to the extent that it's no longer economically viable for us to do what we planned to do at the moment. We will come back to that as soon as we can, as soon as the building industry returns to some degree of stability and sanity. But at the moment, the sort of numbers which are being asked to build very standard units is absolutely astonishing. So that has been put on hold, but only temporarily. And as soon as the opportunity arises again, when costs allow, then that will be pursued further. The second way of doing it is to give support to third parties who wish to build units. And we've done a number of things in that respect. One of which is most important, is having the opportunity for any such development for business rates not to be levied upon any such development until the units are actually occupied. Now, it takes some of the degree of risk away from the developers if they know that business rates won't be incurred until units are actually occupied themselves. And that's something which is within our gift, because we have that discretionary power under NNDR. And the third way in which we've moved towards trying to give more opportunity for third parties to build the units for which there's clearly a demand is within our draft local plan, where more opportunity has been given for business development and for industrial development in particular to take place in all parts of the district, to open up areas so there is greater possibility for land use to be exercised in that way, whether you're talking about brownfield sites or in some cases greenfield sites. So those are the three main ways in which we've tried to push things forward. The one which is most frustrating, as far as I'm concerned, is our inability to build ourselves. And I'm not going to, I mustn't give any numbers out in an open meeting, but you would be utterly astonished by the degree to which the costs to do that in the space of just 6 months had just absolutely skyrocketed, and it's not feasible to expect that those are going to continue to be what they are at the moment. And as soon as they come down, then the economic business case for doing that will be revisited, and I'm sure we'll get on with that.
Yes, Councillor Wicks, thank you.
Thank you for those answers, very valuable. The other one, as most members know, I'm passionate about the enhancement of the infrastructure to serve this area, and in particular Ely North Junction and the dualling of the A47, which I know members are continually pushing the point, but it is something now that I feel we as a council should be actually making representations to these higher parties of the effect on the employment and prosperity of Fenland and the impact it's having.
Councillor C, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I totally agree with Councillor Wicks there. As far as the A47 goes, I mean, Fenland District Council is part of the A47 Alliance, which is made up of a number of different councils and business partners. And that is aimed at during the whole of the A47, right from Peterborough right through to the coast. A new task force and a Finnish group has recently been set up to further coordinate the combined response. And we are lobbying and having visits by ministers. There is a situation from the National Highways that have recently done a consultation on the section from Peterborough to Guy Herne. And unfortunately, they have come back with the response to that consultation saying that the business case doesn't stack up to dual the A47. And one of the reasons they also give is that there are accidents, but there aren't that many accidents. From my point of view, I think they are missing one of the fundamental points, which is that during the A47 from Peterborough right through to east of Wisbech would open what I consider would be an economic corridor opportunity. So it's not just a case of stopping the accidents happening, which in its own right would be a very good thing to do. But also, as Councillor Wick said, we are trying to open up the business opportunities and housing growth within the Fenland area. And that would give an opportunity, I think, to do that. But that doesn't appear to have been taken into account. It's just been, well, there aren't that many accidents and we'll make some adjustments to some of the junctions. Obviously, the A47 Elm High Road roundabout, that is still in their plans to carry out that work, and hopefully that will ease congestion there. But in terms of the dualling, yeah, we continue to lobby. We will continue to lobby. It's something that I'm extremely passionate about and have been for many years. And I'm on the Transport Committee at the CPCA. And I think they're frustrated as well. And I think we're all frustrated with the feedback we're getting. But it isn't going to go away. And certainly I will be pushing the case for it continually. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. Totally agree the A47 needs to be dual, but equally to open up a corridor of economic growth would be a relief road round Whittlesea, which at the moment is absolutely chock-a-block through the 605. We now have a London Tower cranes have moved into Station Road industrial estate. The only roads into that industrial estate were granted HGV passability back in the 50s when lorries were 20 tonnes, not 45 tonnes. They are now taking lorries down Cemetery Road, Inhams Road and Station Road, which are all totally unsuitable for the size of vehicles that are now using it. The only conclusion is that growth within this area is being stifled due to the fact that Whittlesea does not have a relief road from Cadia to the 605 east of Coates, which would then take all the heavy traffic away from the town centre and would open up an economic growth corridor to the east and to the dualling of the 47 at Guy Herne, where it could join it. So that needs to be also pushed as a relief road for the area and open up that corridor, because when the 47s close through RTCs, I actually live on the 605, and the amount of traffic that is directed down there. One day we had an 11-mile traffic jam because of a FATAC RTC on the 47. So don't let them fob you off with, oh, there's not many accidents. You only have to have one to close that road for anything up to 8 to 10 hours. Thank you.
Councillor.
Yeah, thank you for that, councillor. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, there has been and is a problem with the traffic going through Whittlesea. But a lot of that could actually be helped by the dualling of the A47. If you had the dualling of the A47, then pressure would be taken off some of these areas that are affected by RTCs. And it's not just Whittlesea. I went back from a meeting here only a couple of weeks ago, and there was an accident just near the Guyhand roundabout, and the whole A47 was closed. And the traffic to the traffic lights to go on the 605 were right back over the roundabout at Guyhand and going into Wisbech. You know, it's not just Whittlesea, it is the whole of Fenland. I mean, Wisbech gets gridlocked if there's an accident where traffic is diverted through Wisbech and Mary, goes into Wisbech, and the town just comes to a halt, as my colleagues from Wisbech will know. And the same with March. I mean, you know, it is affecting everywhere. And I think to alleviate that pressure on our pretty poor infrastructure within Fenland would be the dualling of the A47. And I think this would be not just from an economic point of view, but from, you know, a total change of what happens within Fenland when with our infrastructure.
I think putting it in perspective, what Councillor Seaton says is quite right. If the dualling of the A47 would take away a lot of the pressure from the 605, a lot of our problems in Whittlesea, I believe, are localised. Traffic movements between west of Whittlesea, Saxon Pit area, and other areas, backwards and forwards, are causing the problems at the moment. But we do acknowledge we do need a Southern Relief Road into Station Road, and Councillor Bowden is working very hard on that, I know, at the moment, to provide funding for an outlined strategic case. Thank you.
I'll just bring up a side point, and it's to do with congestion A47, but is relevant outside. We have just experienced the Highways Agency upgrading Black Cat Roundabout yet again for the 5th time since the initial upgrade was happening. Now, the amount of money they have applied into the Black Cat Roundabout and the project of dualling the A428 into Caxton Gibbet, we could have swallowed on a good section of dual carriaging of the 47. You know, they haven't learned the lessons from day one on the Black Cat Roundabout, and now we're on the 5th iteration of an upgrade. That is a waste of money by anybody's measurement.
Well, thank you, Chairman. I don't think I can comment on what has been spent on something outside of our area. I can only concentrate on what we can try and do in our area. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Burke, you have a point?
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, I was just going to make the comment that the presentation by the transport officer from the combined authority at the last meeting, you know, we'll be lucky to get a light railway between Wisbech and March in the next 5 to 10 years. And I think what he was saying about the A47 is there's almost no chance, because, as you say, the business case doesn't stack up. So we've got to change something at government level to actually be with any chance. And I think a lot of it is the bureaucracy and red tape and the waste of money that goes on all these consultations, where you could be spending it, I think, like as Councillor Wicks is alluding to, actually getting the job done. And I think people are sick and tired with these delays.
Thank you. I don't want to drift too far away from the draft business plan for next year, so we'll continue. Any comments on quality organisation, please? Councillor Booth, yes. Thank you.
Yeah, there was just one point, Chairman, around, I think it was on the previous, oh no, quality organisation goes across 2 pages, doesn't it? So you've got to be about consultation engagement. What I think you're missing there is consultation engagement with parish and town councils as well. So I think that should be added into it. Also from a probably just a structural formatting point of view, that for some reason performance indicators start on the second page of quality organisation. Why that's happened? You probably expect them to be on the first page. But that's what I had in relation to that.
Thank you for that. Any other comments?
Yeah, and this is a comment that Councillor Tierney and I have had. And we know that consultations, a lot of them take place online, but I'm glad to see that the points that was raised last time, that not everybody's online, and it does still go out to the public in written form and can be dealt with in that way. So thank you very much for that, because it is a comment that has been brought to me in the past and it has been dealt with.
Yeah, no, of course, it absolutely must. Sorry, Chairman, with your permission. Of course, we have to make sure that we reach out to everyone. There may come a time in the future when we don't need to anymore because everybody uses online, but we certainly aren't there yet.
Any other comments, please? Councillor Booth.
Thank you, Chair. Again, sort of structural point on page 4 of the plan for the consultation. It says it's split into 3 headings. So it goes, we've got 4th priority. And then it says about there being a 5th priority around council for the future, but we don't have a section on that. So just think we need to probably look at the wording there. I think we've got 4 priorities, so we should say it's 4 priorities. One of those is cross-cutting, but how can we say we've got a 5th priority if we haven't even got a section on it? Just an observation.
Councillor Bowden, thank you.
That's a useful comment. It is a priority, but it actually is incorporated within all the other 4. So as I say, it's a cross-cutting priority. I don't like unnecessarily expanding documents like this. The longer they get, the less readable they get. But just expanding that a little bit may be helpful, I think, given the comments you've just made. So it'll be yet another one of the comments I'll get written down now, and I'm very grateful for it. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. If there's nothing else, I'd just like to thank everybody for their participation. I think it's been very useful. Sorry. Thank you.
My final point, Chairman,
Yes,
is just about the page where we've got about investment across Fenland. Again, I say this every year, there's not enough being done for the rural areas, the isolation. Good point, or an example earlier was about what's happening in March. Trouble is, people in the villages, with the lack of public transport and mobility, and we're identified as an area of rural isolation, they can't get to these facilities, and I still think it's an area that needs to be looked at. We need to look at how we are looking after the rural communities.
No comment? Thank you. It's been a very meaningful session, I believe, and thank you very much for comments all round. And the contents of the draft business plan for 2023-24 are duly noted by the panel. Thank you very much. Councillor Bowden.
Thank you. May I just say that I'm really grateful for the comments which have been made. They will be fed back into the process. So the final version we get will reflect many of the comments which have been made today. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity you've given and the highlights you've given to 1 or 2 things so that we make sure that those changes are made. So thank you very much indeed, Chairman.
Thank you. Yes.
In relation to the task and finish group around looking at KPIs. So obviously we've got some dates sent out on Friday around that. But what I would ask is that, the leader and cabinet are open to the fact that we could well be coming back with additional KPIs that can feed into. I hope it's considered to be a dynamic and living document that we can make changes to as and when required.
Councillor Bowden, thank you.
Thank you for that challenge, Councillor Booth. And yes, I'm extremely open to suggestions. I'd prefer to have replacements rather than additional, because I don't want us to be so deluged with KPIs that they end up being almost meaningless because there are just so many of them. So I think prioritization is very important, but exactly what a KPI what a KPI measures is really important as well. And I don't think we've ever got it perfect. I don't think we ever will get it perfect, to be quite honest. There's always room for improvement, always things which are changing. So I'm very open to suggestions. As I say, prefer replacements to additions, but if an addition is required, so be it.
Councillor Mrs. French, want to come in?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My understanding that your pre-meeting did want some some answers on the March High Street. I'm more than happy, nobody has asked me, but I'm more than happy to give you that update if you do so wish.
Please do, thank you.
Thank you. It has actually come to me, but it should have actually gone to Councillor Seaton because he is the actual chairman of this, and Councillor Count is also part of the working group. So I'm more than happy if you wish. The question was how will March businesses be supported in ensuring that the customers do not diminish their business survive and the disruption caused by the development plan. The redevelopment of the marketplace, Riverside, Broad Street, will bring some disruption. This is unavoidable, but the plan changes. This is far different from an unplanned emergency actions such as the water main repairs carried out in the town bridge prior to Christmas. This unplanned work and a full road closure had a considerable impact, not just across March, but surrounding areas. The planned development work will ensure that a lane remains open north and south throughout the works, so disruption will be kept as low as possible, but some disruption will take place. As part of the contracted work, a liaison officer from the contractors will be in touch with local businesses weekly, ensuring that they know what is planned, when ensuring that impacts on businesses are maintained. I would like also to let you know there are three elements of the works on Broad Street. First, upgrades to all the utilities in the area to bring infrastructure up to standards. March has recently suffered with burst gas pipes, water pipes, and this is considerable. And the other thing that we have been working on for years is the the March area transport study. We've been working on that since 2017. And again, Council Count has been heavily involved with this. And we've been very, very successful. It was broken into different elements. There was the quick wins, the medium term and the long term. Some of the quick wins are completed. The medium term are being done now. New zebra crossings and station roads, St Peter's Road. Speed reductions in Upwell Road and Norwood Road, which we've been asking for certainly when I first started back in 1990, 33 years ago. So I'm quite pleased, we've got something done there. And one of the longer term things that we're working on, Peace Hill Roundabout, that's going to be upgraded. Hostmore, we're going to finally get something sorted there. Hobslot, we're going to get something there because due to the amount of accidents. And lastly, and this is the big one, is the Northern Link Road. And that will save a lot of people in March. So we haven't just been sitting on our laurels, we have actually done a lot of work. And I know that Fenland are working on walking, cycling mobility, which again will enhance not just March, but surrounding areas.
Thank you, Mrs. French, for that information. It'll all be noted into the minutes of the meeting. So thank you very much for that. Thank you. You thought you got away with that, Mark, didn't you? Right, Mark, you've got your sleeves rolled up now almost, so we will continue. We'll go on with item number 7, the budget report, which you have in front of you on pages 31 to 58. To consider any and make any appropriate recommendations to Cabinet on the draft medium-term financial strategy, the draft general fund budget 2023-24, and the draft capital programme 2023-26 for consultation. Would you like to make a presentation to start with? Anybody there?
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. If we were to go back 4 years and see the projections that there were at that time, it really is quite illuminating. 4 years and 2 days ago, the Overview and Scrutiny Committee met for the same reason that we're meeting today. And if you recall, Chairman, I was the chairman at that time of Overview and Scrutiny, so I was the one doing the challenging. And we were presented with some very interesting reports, among which was that even if we continued, as we had been, even if we continued to increase council tax by 2% per annum, by year 5, we'd have a £1.46 million deficit. By year 4, the year we're currently in, it would be 1.377 million. That's assuming there was 2% increase each year. A serious forecast, one would have thought. And what has happened in that 4-year period? In that 4-year period, we have year on year on year produced surplus budgets, surplus outturns at the end of each year. So we have to look very carefully at what is included and what is not included in these reports before jumping to conclusions. Now, I want to pay particular tribute to the work which is done by Mark Saunders and other members of the finance team, I have to say, but Mark in particular, in putting together all of these figures on an annual basis. And his expertise and knowledge is, I can promise you, second to none. But unfortunately, Mark can only put down figures for things he actually knows about. And increasingly, we're in a situation where we don't actually know what funding we're going to be receiving until very often during the course of a year itself. Additionally, there are changes which are likely to be taking place. For example, an increase in the NNDR base figure because of increased building of new premises, which we don't include within our projections because it is potentially dangerous to do so. Other local authorities, even other local authorities in Cambridgeshire, don't take that approach, but we take that cautious approach. And by taking that cautious approach on those matters and many others as well, we are in a position where we have never found ourselves in a desperate financial position. When things go wrong, we have almost built into the system a large amount of leeway. Now, you may recall, Chairman, that what I had said 4 years ago was that this was effectively systemic over budgeting. Now, that's not meant as a criticism. It's meant as a statement of fact in terms of how the outturns actually have been, not just over the last 4 years, but over the last 10 or 12 years or even more, because of the assumptions, the prudent assumptions which are made in the figures which are presented to us each year. And I was having a discussion earlier today with Mark about this and saying, I don't want those prudent assumptions to be changed. It's actually sensible for us to have prudent assumptions, and then we can work outwards from that rather than rashly make assumptions which then turn out not to be true, and we find ourselves facing a deficit during a year or beyond. Now, when 4 years ago we started the new term of office for the council, I did make 2 immediate changes to the budgetary process. The first was, with the agreement of council, the first was that we would work on the assumption in the medium-term financial strategy of no council tax increases, rather than having a 1.97, 1.98% increase per each year. And the reason for doing that was twofold. The first was a statement of intent that if we could possibly do so, I didn't actually want to see the council tax increased unless we absolutely had to. But the second was also to provide a sharper target for the spending departments so that there would be that much work, more work done towards getting the best financial outcome that we could have in each area. And that has worked out remarkably well, I have to say, over the course of the last 4 years. We haven't had any council tax increase in the last 4 years. We haven't had and if we don't have a council tax increase this year, it'll be the 5th successive year we've done that, which is a record which very few other councils are able to say around the country. There are some, but not very many. And that was a really important change which was made to the way in which we would work. The second was that I said that the evidence was that there has been systemic over budgeting for the reasons that I've been saying before. And in order properly to account for that, we established a budget equalisation reserve. And the purpose of the budget equalisation reserve, I said 4 years ago, was to provide a potential feedback loop so that to the extent that we ask for more money from our residents than we actually spend in a year, that money is able to be ploughed back into the system. And it's been kept separate. Now, were it not for COVID, the situation would have come to a head before now. The last 2 years have been exceptionally uncertain in terms of the finances. COVID was very difficult for us to manage in financial terms, quite apart from the practical terms. And we've had to be very prudent during the last 2 years because we just didn't know how we would come out the other end from COVID in a whole host of different ways. But the basic premise still exists that that budget equalisation reserve has been created in order to provide a feedback loop so that the systemic over budgeting is counteracted. Because why should we be taking more money from our residents than we actually need to spend in a year? Now, there are 2 ways of approaching that. The first is to attack, if that's the word to use, to change the way in which we do the budget. As I said, I'm not inclined to do that because I think that the way Mark has done it for years is the right way because it is prudent. He doesn't make guesses about what might happen during the course of the year, even though I think we can reasonably predict there'll be money coming to us from central government during next year, which we'll find out about during the course of the year. He doesn't put any of that into the budget. And I think he's right not to do so. It's right, first of all, because it's consistent, and secondly, because it's prudent. But the ultimate result is that we end up systemically with this surplus at the end of each year once we get the outturn. And those surpluses, since the budget equalisation reserve was set up, have really just grown. And they're now over £1 million. From memory, 1.06 million. Yeah, 1.06 million. Over the period since this started. And that represents money that we have taken from our local residents and we haven't actually spent it. So I'd like, first of all, for consideration of the figures that we've got in front of us today to be taken in the context of what we've experienced in the last 4 years, and for that matter, in the 10 years before that, in terms of how budgeting actually works here in this council. And many of the numbers that we have in front of us today are themselves, especially in respect of the current financial year and the next financial year, 2023-24, have already been superseded by events. And overall, the position is substantially better now than appears in the numbers that you've got in front of you. And in my opinion, for various reasons, which I'm happy to go into, the numbers are going to get better still as we come towards the budget setting process, which takes place at our council and cabinet meetings on the 20th of February. And I'll go further than that, and I'll say, in the light of experience, and I think that I've got a very strong reason to say this, that when we get to the outturn for 2023-24, the numbers will end up being better still. So sorry if I've talked in some degree of generality there, but I would like to put into context the overall position so far as the budget is concerned. But I'm more than happy to take questions about some of the detail which is within it. If the questions are too much of the detail, I'll be passing them over to officers. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bowden, for that. During your presentation, you've made reference several times to the word assumptions. There are also realities. Realities in core spending power, new homes bonus decreasing, business rate shortfalls. Now, you've indicated that over the years we've over budgeted, so therefore presumably we have reserves that you're saying, I think, if I'm understanding correctly, would counter those shortfalls, which are identified in the report as major risks. So is that my understanding, that we have sufficient reserve power to overcome these difficulties?
Two different types of reserves I'll talk about here. The first is the general reserve that we've got, and to be quite honest, our reserves are maybe not set up in the most appropriate way for us to be able to make use of them in the future. And that's something which will be addressed and will come before Cabinet and Council on the 20th of February. But we have built up considerable reserves over a period of time. But the particular reserve I was just talking about was the budget equalisation reserve, which has been kept separate because it's specifically related to those, quote, systemic over budgeting issues where the outturn ended up being a surplus, even if on occasion we were budgeting for a deficit in the year. So that particular reserve is, in my opinion, quite separate from the general reserves that we've got. Ultimately, they're all reserves of the council, of course. The one thing I can't do is to give a positive answer to your question. I can't give a guarantee that what's going to happen in 3, 4, 5 years' time is going to be sufficiently covered by the reserve position that we've got at the moment. I just can't. The further ahead you go, the less certain things are. It's possible that there will be very significant business rate changes in 2025-26. It's possible that fairer funding will come in, which may harm district councils as opposed to county councils in two-tier areas. The new homes bonus is changing and has been changing for some time. So there are lots of things which will change. And those things are called risk. Now, risk, it has to be said, isn't always a one-way thing. Just because something is identified as a risk doesn't mean to say it's necessarily going to be negative. And there is something which has to be borne in mind in all of this. And that is that we as a council are in a better position than, I'd say, the majority of other district councils around the country. I'm not going to say the vast majority, but we're certainly in a better position than the average district council around the country, so far as our finances are concerned, because we have been prudent over the years. And I'm not just talking about the last 4 years, I'm talking about the last 14 years at least, that we've been prudent in what we've done. As a result, we are in a stronger position than many other district councils. And the reason, the higher reason that I've got confidence about how we'll be able to address the future is that we aren't in control of the way in which government makes changes to do with regulations which affect the way in which we receive money, whether it's through direct grants, the retention of business rates, fairer funding, whatever. We're not in control of that. But what I do know is the central government will not deliberately go out of its way to bankrupt local government. It's just not in their interest to do that. And whilst there may be 1 or 2 authorities which will fall by the wayside because of difficulties that they have created very much of their own very often, but whilst there may be the odd 1 or 2 exceptions, generally the government will change regulations so as to ensure that councils can continue to operate financially. And since we are in a significantly better position than many, and certainly a lot better position than the worst ones, I've got great confidence that whatever those changes are, whatever the pluses and minuses are, they will overall be sufficient for us to be able to continue. So I can't predict how things are going to change. I do recognize as risks all of the matters which are mentioned within the report, but there is that counterbalancing fact that central government will not go out of its way to destroy local government financially. And we are in a far stronger position than many. So I believe we're in a far more resilient position than others. I hope that overall context helps, but I can't predict the detail. I most definitely can't predict the detail. And that's why I'm reluctant to give a nice, simple yes to the answer that you give, to the question you gave.
No, I accept the fact that you can't look into the future. We all know that. But again, as you've used the word assumptions, we have to make certain assumptions based on your professionalism within the team. And that's where we're obviously looking into and challenging today. I'd just like a bit of clarification on core spending power, if someone can tell me a little bit more about that, because it appears that we're well down on the national average on that one, and I don't know the reasons why. Perhaps someone can tell me.
I'm not in a position to give an answer, comparative answer to other councils. And of course, every council is different. You've got very different sizes of councils. I don't know if either of my colleagues feel competent to give an answer about comparative core spending power as opposed to other councils. It's not, that is the sort of question you need some notice on normally.
Indeed. I've only got 3:10. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, core spending power is the measure the government uses to determine what resource and funding authorities have and compare it from one year to the next, and it includes all the things there on page 31 of the report. Historically, what's also included in there is the level of council tax increases. Now, because we haven't increased our council tax over the last 5 years, we automatically don't increase our core spending power by as much as all other authorities who actually have increased their council tax. So that's one reason why we probably slightly behind some of the national average figures.
Interrupt you there. Does that mean then that because we haven't increased council tax, we're now being penalised by central government?
No, none of the funding that's in the list that it's on page 31, business rates or RSG or new homes bonus or things like that are not dependent on whether you increase council tax or not. So we're not specifically penalised for any of those with any of those areas of funding for that decision. No.
And just to say, it's actually a good thing that we've managed to maintain services whilst decreasing our overhead expense, for want of a better word. It's actually good that we have managed to keep our spending down whilst still maintaining services. That's not a bad thing to do at all.
Peter, yes.
Just for clarity, when they talk about the core spending power, for comparative purposes and assumptions, they assume that every council is going to raise their council tax by their permitted amount. So it doesn't penalise us in any way, but that's why the league tables can look very different.
Well, that was my fear, that maybe we're being penalised. We're on 4.8% against the national average of 9.2. So yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, okay. Both.
So what is the purpose of that, indicator? It doesn't seem to to do much from what you're saying.
Well, believe it or not, you've just touched on another question that I was discussing with Mark earlier today. We often question what the purpose is of a lot of the numbers which are either produced by central government for us or which we produce for central government. And yes, I think that there is one thing which is useful for that from the point of view of central government, and that is it gives an idea to central government about what is likely to be in the whole government accounts as far as local government is concerned for the forthcoming financial year. But those whole of government accounts are themselves, well, we could talk about them for ages, but the extent to which they are fictitious is something which we could say a lot about. But they are useful for the projections for whole of government accounts. But in terms of the use that they've got for actual local authorities, I think I'd agree with you, they haven't got a great deal of use.
Just, sorry.
So on a separate point, I mean, I've read the report in front of the cabinet paper. So it looks to me like we're getting additional funding from the government through the budget settlement. So am I correct in saying that the shortfall would be about 109,000, taking the two figures together? Is that correct?
There are many other amendments which there have been to the projected budget for 23-24, and they're still coming through this week. I'm hoping that ARP will come up with the NNDR1 number for us this week sometime, and that in my opinion, I'm putting my neck on the line a bit here, but in my opinion, that's going to produce another significant positive sum as well. There were negative sums also which have come in. There have been increases, for example, in the potential precepts from IDBs. There are other positive things, for example, to do with provisions made against doubtful debts on NNDR. So there are some big figures, and the items I've just been talking about, they're all six-figure sums, either plus or minus. But overall, if you asked my opinion, I'd be very disappointed if we didn't end up with a surplus figure rather than a deficit figure based on the numbers we've had so far and what information I've had so far. I'm delighted to see that Mark is nodding his head there because there was no guarantee he'd agree with that. But that is my feeling at the moment. But it might just take the NNDR1 number to come out differently from what I'm guessing for that to be turned around. So it's always the way when you're putting budgets together. They develop over the course of the period of time. And again, because of the assumptions which are made in the December report, which is produced each year, it is almost invariably the case that by the time you come to January, the figures look better than they did in December. And by the time you get to February, they look better than they did in January. Almost always, but it can't be guaranteed.
Mark, do you want to come in there?
Oh, just in reference to the core spending power, it actually did become useful this year because the government actually gave local authorities funding to ensure their core spending power increased by at least 3%, excluding any council tax increases. So we did actually get some benefit from that in the settlement for next year. And just to say, Councillor Bowden's absolutely right. We've got there's quite a few large figures to yet to come out of the process. So we're still waiting for, and the biggest ones of those are all relating to business rates, which are a significant amount of our funding, and the various elements of that will come to fruition in the next week or so.
I think the panel will be reassured that in order to balance the books, we're not going to cut services next year. Could I have a comment on that, please?
There is no intention to cut services, to cut frontline services to balance the books. It's entirely appropriate, however, and this isn't part of the budget, this is after the elections, it's entirely appropriate for the new council to take its own view about what services there should be and at what level. So the one thing I don't want to do is to say we are setting something in stone here, which is what will apply for the next 12 months. A new council may take a different view on a whole host of things. They may wish to spend more money on frontline services in some areas. They may wish to spend less money in some areas. And that's an entirely appropriate thing for a new council to do with the new mandate that it will have as a result of the elections which take place. But as far as this budget setting process is concerned, there is no intention whatsoever of cutting services to make the figures balance.
Thank you for that reassurance. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I guess it's an observation, but I welcome any comments. The fairer funding review, I believe, should have been introduced about 2 years ago, was the original deadline. Is this going to be the new equivalent of the revaluation, where the government has basically keeps kicking it down into the long grass because we're going to be, what, 6, 7 years after the original? And if we're talking 25, 26, I mean, that's a long way to go anyway. So, yeah, the trouble is, it's the uncertainty it brings for local government and the issues it creates for trying to do balanced budget.
Well, you've conflated three different things there, and in all three cases, you've erred on the side of favouritism towards the government, I have to say. Let's first of all deal with the fairer funding issue. It's not just a couple of years that's been in abeyance. I think it must be 6 or 7 years now that we've been told every year, next year, we'll have fairer funding. And we've been told it again and again and again, to the point that we just don't believe anything nowadays. So maybe fairer funding will turn up eventually, but I wouldn't care to say when. And that has real implications for a number of councils, particularly upper tier councils in 2-tier areas. But it's a difficult thing to do. And it's particularly difficult at this point of the national electoral cycle, in my opinion, because whilst the idea behind fairer funding isn't of itself to increase or decrease the amount of money which goes to local government, it is to change the balance of where it goes. And the problem with that is that you have winners and losers. And the winners don't give any great credit to the government for what they do, and the losers squeal like stuck pigs. So it's not the sort of thing that it's easy to do at this stage of the electoral cycle. So that's fairer funding. As far as the business rates are concerned, yes, we are told that business rate change will take place in 25, 26, but again, it's really a difficult issue. Now, if I were the person in charge, which maybe fortunately I'm not a person in charge of our national finances, but if I were the person in charge, I tell you what I'd be very inclined to do. It would be to abolish the whole of the business rating system, to abolish the valuation office agency, to get rid of that, and to put in a corporation tax increase to be able to make up the 20-odd million pound difference there may be. 20-odd billion pound difference, sorry, there may be. And that would then give a much greater opportunity for those businesses which have actually got physical premises to be more competitive, as opposed to those who are operating purely online and those who are operating from overseas. We'd have some real opportunities there to be able to help things, and we'd remove an enormous amount of administration, because I don't think any of you in this room would believe how complicated the business rate system, national non-domestic rate system, how complicated it has become. It is absolutely ridiculous how much effort there is which goes into to collecting this particular tax. Now, I doubt that government will be that radical as to get rid of NNDR, but I think that they would be well inclined to do so. So as far as these risks that you talk about, Councillor Booth, are concerned, yes, you're right, we can't tell when they're going to happen. We have been promised some of them for years. We've been threatened, if that's the word to use, with some of them for years. When and if they take place, I just don't know. But I'll come back to the point I made at the very beginning, and that is, whatever happens, however these changes take place, and some of them could affect us very badly indeed, I have to say, whatever happens, ultimately, central government will not allow large amounts or even significant amounts of local government to go bankrupt. They just cannot do that. And we are in a much stronger position, that we're much more resilient than most of our district council colleagues. We're in a much more resilient position to be able to suffer the storms of whatever ends up happening. They can't let a quarter, a fifth, a tenth of local government go into bankruptcy. They can allow the odd one or two effectively to go there. It's not actually called bankruptcy, but you know what I mean. And then you end up with the situation we had in Northamptonshire, and there are one or two other councils, which I won't name, which may be facing something rather similar right at the moment. But it will be absolutely only the odd one or two. So whatever changes are made, there have to be both transitional reliefs and countermeasures to ensure that the whole swathe of local government doesn't go under. And we are quite high up in that list in terms of the resilience to be able to face that.
I make no apology for bringing up freedom of leisure again, but should the worst happen and they go to the wall, is there a contingency plan in place? The question has to be asked.
That will be a matter of us taking a considered opinion at the time. Obviously, we have thought about this. We've thought about it quite a lot, because at a number of points a bit of time ago, it looked as though it was significantly possible that they may not survive. And that's the whole reason why we and its other authority customers provided financial support to Freedom Leisure. Now, there is no reason to believe that it is in a position now where that outcome is likely. Having said that, it's always possible. And if they were to go into that position, then we would be obliged to take on the responsibility of those leisure centres. Now, that's, I cross my fingers when I say this, there's no reason to believe that's going to happen in the next 4 months. And that will then be a matter for the new council to decide what its priorities are and what it wishes to do. Now, I don't believe it's going to happen at all. There's no reason why it should, because it's in the interests neither of Freedom Leisure nor of its 25 or so customer councils to allow that to happen. But if it did, yes, we have thought about it, And we know that we would then find ourselves in a significant difficulty in terms of the continuing provision of services. So yes, there is definitely a risk, but we have a means of at least partially mitigating that, as have all the fellow councils who are also customers. It's a bit like the old idea of mutually assured destruction for nuclear weapons. It's not in the customer's interests, the council's interests, to force Freedom Leisure into bankruptcy, and Freedom Leisure itself doesn't want to go bankrupt. So between us all, I'm sure that we will work together to ensure that that doesn't happen.
Thank you. I wasn't suggesting they go bankrupt in the next 4 months, but if you're setting a budget for 2023-24, we're talking about 16 months' time. So I just want to be reassured that there are contingency plans in place.
I use the 4 months to say that would be something for a new council to consider rather than this one, in terms of something which happened before then. Not that I'm expecting that it would. For the reasons I said before, there is no reason to believe that the council customers would want to create that difficulty for themselves by effectively allowing Freedom Leisure to go to the wall. It's not in the interests of the customers, ourselves being one of them, to do that. So accommodation would, I'm sure, be met if it's necessary to do so.
Whatever the makeup of the next council, we have the same officers. That's the point.
For which we should be very grateful, Chairman.
Councillor Wicks, please. Thank you.
I know it's not part of the discussions, but my question relates to risk registers and mitigating factors within the corporate register. Do they exist?
Yes, of course they exist. Now, we as members and members of the Audit and Risk Management Committee only see really the top level of the risk management system which exists. And the risk management system doesn't just incorporate risk registers, but a whole host of estimates which are made about the severity of potential severity of the risk, and have responsibilities which are given for various individuals and various departments to be able to do something about. But the real value of the risk management procedure that we've got isn't in the top part that we as members see, it's in what happens at a lower level. And what we see at the top of the risk register system is supported fully by a whole raft of risk analysis which takes place at operational level. That's monitored very carefully by a group of senior officers, and it's managed by individual operational departments. And it is thorough, it is substantial. Now, I personally believe that we can actually improve the part of it that we deal with in a number of different ways, and that's something which I will be raising at some future time. But I can promise you that yes, there is a system in place, but we only get to see a very small part of it. It is comprehensive, and I have yet to see a significant example of it failing. And when it's been put under stress, for want of a better word, then there's been a very quick response.
Paul, would you like to come in there?
It's briefly, I mean, Councillor Bowden's spot on. We do have a corporate risk methodology that underpins all of what we do in order that we can be proactive in terms of how we quantify risk and mitigate against risk. And whilst it is thorough and it's well thought through and it tries to quantify the risks that we know that exist and preempt other risks, it can never be entirely capturing of all the risks that exist. And a good example of that is the pandemic and the pandemic coming about and the issues and implications that caused. So when we're confronted with issues that we are unable to predict, it's about the robust systems we have in place to respond accordingly, the agility to sort of react and deal with those unforeseen risks if and when they occur in the future.
Councillor Bowden, yes.
Thank you, Chair. One area we haven't talked about today is, and this is to risks as well, is about the planning department and resourcing of that. Now, we did get an email fairly recently from the portfolio holder around other changes within that department, and I think our statistics have been falling about delivering within the That's the impression I got from previous reports. So do we have to put more resources into that to get it to, I suppose, a state where we can deliver the service we want to for Fenland?
Thank you for the question. If by the statistics falling, you mean the number of days it's taken to make determinations has been falling, then yes, that's what's been happening fairly recently. We've been improving our performance in recent times. It did get worse, especially if it got worse during the COVID years, it has to be said. And we do have an astonishingly high level of demand on the planning service. And it was something we didn't actually predict. We thought both during COVID and in the immediate aftermath of COVID, if anything, things would be falling rather than rising in terms of the volumes which exist. But what we have been doing, and a significant amount of the work is being completed, is to have a root and branch analysis of the work which has been done within the planning department, with a view to a significant reorganization of getting from the inputs that we've got to the outputs that we give. And a lot of work has been put into that. A lot more will be needed, but already it is producing clear opportunities for efficiency savings and for changes which make more efficient and effective use of our existing staff, which should mean, no, I'll say strong than that, which will mean that we will be able to get more from the same number of staff that we've got at the moment. I'll give you an example, a very simple example. We have some very senior and well qualified, highly qualified members of the team, and too much of their time had been spent doing administrative work which could be done by other people in the team because it was part of a whole. Splitting the job up so that part of it would be done by people with the skills necessary to do those parts, but leaving the people with the higher skills and the higher pay, it has to be said, to do the work which they were most capable of doing. That, if you were to expand it out across the whole of a year's worth of work, has a significant potential saving. So changes like that in processes really will make a difference. So no, I very much hope that we're not going to need to actually spend more on planning. I hope, in fact, that we'll end up, it does depend on volume and volume demand, which I can't predict at the moment, but I hope we'll end up actually spending less on planning and getting better results. And I think the chief exec may wish to say something about that.
Oh, yes.
This is to do with the head of paid service work.
Spot on. I think essentially the substantive structure we have right now is fit for purpose. The review that we're undertaking will almost certainly ask us to reflect on that, and that's healthy. That's something that we do all the time. You know, when our services and how they're delivered change, of course, you know, the way in which we resource those needs to reflect that. But I think the key issue that we're experiencing right now is based on external factor, and that is the reality that there is a real national skill shortage around planners. And we're caught in the same sort of trap that many councils are, that we're all fighting for a really small pool of talented planners. So there's a lot that we can do to kind of influence people to want to come here, and we've got a really good track record as a council. We have a good name. That means a lot. I think looking at adopting modern ways of working also means a lot, as well as working hard to retain the talent that we have. But you know, there's no easy way, or there's no way of sugarcoating the reality, and that is there are some significant skill shortages around the area of professionally qualified and really talented planners out there.
There are no more comments. The budget report is noted. Thank you very much for your attendance today. Thank you. We'll move on to item number 8, is fees and charges for 2023-24. To review the council's fees and charges for 2023-24 in line with the budget strategy considered by Cabinet on the 12th of December 2022. Do you wish to make an opening statement at all, Councillor Bowden?
Right, the report, as ever, is very well written, and so it does explain what it is. it is worth saying that no increase in fees and charges have been included in the draft budget report, the numbers we've seen so far, and the potential further income which would be generated from the proposals we've got in front of us, it itself amounts to over £173,000. It's yet another of these six-figure sums, plus or minus. This has been produced again based on the assumption that people should pay for the service that they actually receive personally. Now, there are some exceptions to that. There are quite a number of the charges which are fixed by central government, or where we have to be aware that we're in a competitive market and we can't price ourselves out of the market. And work is done by officers to ensure that what is put before us is realistic in terms of what we could and should charge. There are some charges, for example, which are meant only to cover the cost of the services which they actually provide, and we have to account for them in that particular way. But overall, the balance is made the way it is. I'm fortunate again to have Mark with me, who can answer some specific questions on specific fees or charges, but I would welcome all comments which are made by members, particularly about specific fees and charges, because this paper we have in front of us isn't a final paper. There are some figures we can't change because we're forced to have them, but there are others we can. So any challenge, any question is welcome. Thank you, Chairman.
Are there any questions or comments from the panel? Councillor Purser.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not totally sure that I'm actually asking this in the right place, what have you, but it's a question that I'm asked on a regular basis by many people right way all around. But can you guarantee us that car parking in Fenland will remain free for the near future at least?
To both, thank you.
Right. A couple of things on that. The first is, it is ever possible that central government will change regulations to force local councils where they don't currently charge to charge. It's possible. I've known stranger things to happen. So we can't influence what may be forced on us at a national level. But secondly, we've got a situation where we've got an election taking place in 4 months' time, less than 4 months' time. And of course, it will entirely be down to the new administration to decide if they want to charge for car parking or not. Now, the overwhelming majority of councils around the country charge for car parking. And I can tell you, for them, it's excellent because they make nice surpluses out of their car parks and they use it to subsidize the rest of their operations. And I'm sorry to say that as far as that is concerned, basically, it's another tax, and that's what they use it for. And I'm not making a party political point here. It's councils which are run by all parties and by none who do this. Now, there are some councils, such as ourselves and such as East Cams, and we're a very much declining breed, who don't do this, who decide that there is advantage to be had in allowing people to go to their local shops in their car and not have to pay money to go there. And as long as there continues to be a majority in this council which says that, then there will not be car park charges unless forced on us by central government. So that's the strongest guarantee I can give, other than to say, so long as I'm in the position as leader, there will not be car park charges.
That's good to hear. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Booth.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, just following up on that, I know, that is the policy of this council, and I've been a strong advocate of it. I think we're starting to get into the situation with our market towns now where free car parking isn't the only thing that we need to do to turn it around. And we've got to come up with some better offering to try and keep our market towns viable. I know I often go on about the rural villages. Well, where do they go and shop in the towns when they can get the transport there? So I think as a council, we've got to be looking at how we do regenerate the market towns. I know we've got these certain bids that are going through different phases at the moment, but I think there's got to be some offering, something there that will really attract people. I know Ely often gets recited as a place to go and have a look at because they've got a thriving sort of small business community there. You know, that's what we need to do. You know, the comments I get is, you know, the market towns, they've just got pound shops and charity shops, and you know, we need better shops and services there.
Thank you, Chairman. We're moving maybe a little bit away from the budget itself. As far as improving our market towns are concerned, generally the amount of money which is needed for changes such as that are very considerable indeed, well beyond our normal budgets. And we are dependent upon opportunities which are provided to us either directly by central government or indirectly by central government through normally the CPCA. So we do have the current high street funding work, which is going to be taking place in March. We've got levelling up money, which is we hope going to be going in as far as is definitely going in as far as Wisbech is concerned. So we do have opportunities to make changes. One of the big difficulties that we have, though, is what is the future of the high street? And that's a subject which is probably beyond the time we've got available, and certainly beyond my ability to give a definitive answer to. And I listen to what the experts say on this, and I'm always I'm hit by the fact that what the experts say in one decade turns out to be totally different from what they say in the next decade. So at the moment, they're saying that the future of the high street is in experiences, that we need to provide experiences for people so that they can do things in what are currently shops, which maybe they can't do at the moment. Now, I've got every reason to believe in 10 years' time they'll say it's going to be something completely different. But we've got to be aware that there needs to be flexibility in terms of the way in which our high streets are allowed to develop. They cannot just stay in aspic, just as they always have been. They have to be allowed to change. And sometimes, let me tell you, those changes are ones which I or you around this table may not actually approve of. They may not be things that we personally like. And in fact, those of us, in fact, I think all of us are growing older. As we grow older, it may well be the case that there are more things which people want to do in the high street, which we don't actually want to do ourselves and don't very much approve of. But we've got to facilitate that change. We mustn't try to keep our high streets just stuck the way they are at the moment. And that flexibility comes down to more than just having money. Money is important, of course, but also to our planning process and to the way in which we approach the whole way in which this council operates. And I look to future councillors to ensure that we continue to have the flexibility and allow the flexibility for things to change naturally as they would change anyway, and for us to be facilitators of change rather than obstructing the change which probably would take place anyway. So sorry if that was a rather general answer, but yes, where there are opportunities for us to make physical improvements and to get money to do so, we shall do that. We already have done, we'll carry on.
Can I just ask about room hire at Boathouse and South Fens? It's been increased by 10.1%. Is there a large demand for room hire at both these premises?
Yes, there is a significant demand, but it's something where we have to be very aware of competitive position. And it's the opinion of officers that there is a relatively small price elasticity of demand as far as that is concerned. So we have applied a just general inflationary increase as far as that's concerned. The likelihood is we could actually earn more money and we'd still have the demand if we were to increase it by 15, 20, 25%. But you've got to have a balance here. Do we want to create unnecessarily greater problems for the current tenants by having that sort of charge? So it's not just a matter of maximizing the council's income. We've also got to think of the impact it would have on the businesses which we are meant to be trying to support. So this is a fair balance, but it's one which should be financially viable, both for our tenants, but also for ourselves.
I was thinking more, in fact, of the other way around, that if there wasn't a large demand, maybe decreasing would attract more people.
Absolutely, but there is the demand.
Can I touch on the delicate? Oh, someone else coming first. Councillor Scanlon.
Thank you. I totally agree with what you've been saying about the high streets need to evolve, and they have evolved over the years. But a word of caution, don't believe in too many experts. The definition of an expert, X is an unknown factor and a spurt is a drip under pressure. And that needs to be taken into consideration when dealing with these experts. But I totally agree that towns evolve, and they may not evolve in the way that we like them, and a lot of them don't. So, but it's called evolution, and it's ongoing all the time. And the moment we try and stop it, we're in trouble.
Yeah, very wise words from Councillor Scanlon. Experts are only as good as the information that they've got available, and even then sometimes they get it wrong, and sometimes they can be the greatest experts there are and still can't see into the future. An example being given, late 1940s, the chairman of IBM made a prediction that the world demand for computers would probably be about 5 or 6. That is, 5 or 6 computers would be needed for the world, and that was as recent as the late 1940s. You had the position in the late 1890s. There was a conference of architects in New York, the first international architectural convention, and they broke up in confusion after a few days because they couldn't see how it was going to be possible for towns and for cities to continue to expand, because they couldn't see how it was going to be possible to deal with all the horse manure that was going to be, and any further expansion would just make it impossible to continue to have operations within the towns. It's very easy not to make predictions, and sometimes predictions are made which are wrong even by the experts at the time they make it. A good example being the astronomer general in the early 1960s who said life's impossible on Mars because it rotates so quickly that the winds there must be 600 miles an hour. Well, the Earth rotates quickly and we don't have winds of 600 miles an hour. It was just a basically stupid comment for an expert to make. And that's why I said this idea we hear from some experts now in the property world, that the future of the high street is experience, that we take it with a very big pinch of salt indeed, very big pinch of salt. But the thing is, we've got to be flexible, and we have to facilitate the changes which are going to happen as far as our high streets are concerned. We mustn't be an anchor to stopping change. We must provide the oil to grease the wheels to facilitate that change.
Thank you, Councillor Person.
Yeah, just a small little, I'm trying to think how to put this without being flippant or quick, but you made a small comment there, and I think I heard the expression on one occasion, especially in a committee that I was attending, we must be right because our computer said so, which is really not the case at all sometimes. I think that sometimes I think people become far too reliant on computers, and they should possibly go back to paper and pen, and maybe even the abacus sometimes, but in my case, but I think sometimes we do become a little bit too reliant on these and the possible software, which really isn't giving the right answer sometimes.
Is there an update on the leather sofa issue, please?
Yes, brief update is everything's back to normal. In fact, I'm going to leave it at that. I could go into an enormous length about what happened and how it happened. But if you want the update, all back to normal. Shouldn't have happened in the first place. All back to normal.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Chairman. Something I actually was going to make comment on earlier on with the leader and the chief executive being here. Maybe you can pass my comments back to the various officers and what have you. I do apologise for not bringing this up before, but on the refuse and recycling side of it, especially over the Christmas period, where shall we say the calendar for collections has been a little bit all over the place because of bank holidays and all the likes. And I've actually been down to the March, not the refuse centre, the recycling centre on several occasions. But I think the staff down there and the general guys that come around and collect the rubbish for us, they do an absolutely superb job. And I think I wasn't saying in front of Councillor Murphy, but he's unfortunately gone now, but he's actually obviously the portfolio holder for that. But I think that all the staff there should be absolutely congratulated for the hard work they do and keeping the streets clean and keeping everything absolutely really they do an absolutely brilliant job. And I have to say that through the mobile and the tablets and what have you, I do actually use the Fenland District Council WhatsApp for the collection days on a regular basis. I just keep an eye on it all the time, and the person who keeps that up to date also deserves, you know, our thanks and congratulations for it. I'd like that to be passed back through the system if that could be. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, sorry, yes.
I mean, just on that, I did try accessing the collection dates of the website over the Christmas period, and actually there were some technical issues with it during that time, and there has been on previous years. So I think that's an area where we just need to, if you're reliant on your PCs, it doesn't always work that well.
Thank you. First of all, just answering Councillor Booth's comment, I'll look at that myself. It's an area I'm interested in. So. Okay, thank you. It's a shame that we've lost a number of individuals from the room on that comment, but it's something which I will, it's something I've got an interest in. So thank you for that. Just for the record, I think that very grateful for Councillor Purse's comments about the rubbish collection and also about street cleaning, and I'm sure that that will be passed on to the members concerned, the officers concerned. But so far as the recycling centres are concerned, that's the responsibility of the county council, not the district council.
Councillor Scanlon, please.
Thank you, Chairman. As chairman of Fenland District Council, I have to extol the professionalism of all the staff at Fenland for their raising to the occasion when the risks are prevalent, and COVID was one of them, and the refuse collection service, second to none anywhere in the country. And I've had visitors from other parts of the country and they say, you get your bins collected on time? Yes, we always do. And if it's not on that day, it's on the published date on the calendar that they send out. So my congratulations to all of the staff, but very professional attitude to the members of the public.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yes, going on from that, my brother actually lives just outside Peterborough, a little village called Newborough, and he often comments when he comes over here that you know, blimey, you get your bins collected on time and everything works so well and everything, and apparently in their village their services are actually being really chopped down. I mean, it's not one of our problems, but it's basically going to show that in the Peterborough sort of area like that, they're not getting the services that we are. So I think we should be very grateful for what we get.
Chairman, we will pass the message back, but the one thing we are not interested in doing is comparing what we are doing with other individual councils. We'll let them answer for themselves, and we'll concentrate on making sure that our service continues to be as good as it is and improves where it's possible, because we don't have a 100% record. I think it's almost impossible to get a 100% record, but we strive for 100%, and I think that is shown by the results that we get.
Councillor Booth.
So just one question I've got on the proposed changes under section 3.2, where we've got the mini factories, self-ends, business centre and the boathouse. So I think there's been a lot of discussion in the past about the fact that they should be considered to be like breeder units for businesses. And I'm just wondering, have we fully considered that, particularly if we're increasing some of the fees there by about 40%? I know it does talk about increasing some and decreasing the others, but are we satisfied it's still going to drive the right outcomes we're looking for? Because it's not always just about occupancy there. Sometimes it's about getting those businesses set up, and then they can move on to other areas when they can find the facilities.
It'd be very easy for me to give a pat answer to that one. It is important, of course, that we do have charges which are realistic in terms of the costs that we incur as well in the areas concerned. I'm just looking at Mark to see if he's got an answer specifically to that, because what we do is we don't, if not Mark doesn't think all these numbers off the top of his own head. We do consult with the relevant departments and the relevant officers to get their opinions about what should happen. And then Mark makes the number about off the top of his head, but only after he's consulted, with the relevant officers concerned. So it may be something Mark can give an answer to.
I've got too much more to say than what's in the report, really, because what happens with all these charges is we get the proposals from all the various services who do their own review of their services and to take into account all the issues which Bowden's talked about before in terms of making sure it's competitive, making sure they're covering the cost of the service in wherever possible. So this time, some of those changes on the mini factories on the boathouse and the South End have been quite different than previous years, because what they've done is they've actually gone through and actually done a proper review of all those and see what levels are in the locality and what the competitive rates are and what they think is a competitive rate to set the charges at, because the charges for those rates are set between a minimum and a maximum. So that gives them some room to actually negotiate with the tenants to come to a rent which everybody's happy with, and obviously we take on board there. I was going to use the word expertise, but I shan't after the current after the previous cover. Yes, sir.
And one point to emphasise is that, of course, these new rents won't apply to existing tenants until their current rent agreements are terminated. It's only when renegotiation takes place or any new tenants which are moving.
Yeah, Peter. Yeah.
Can I just add a point it's about a year ago that we got a new head of property in, and he has made a big difference and really helped. And as Mark says, we take market reviews, we take market soundings, we work with properly qualified surveyors, and the occupancy rates around these things tell us that we are doing the right thing. And I think we've already driven up income in those areas just by looking at that and going through all the existing leases, renewing leases, giving them these parameters to work within, which they know are the market rates that we can obtain. So I think having that for the surveyors when they go out and negotiate, having that minimum and maximum, they've got some flexibility. And to be fair, as property officer, I sign off all the new leases that come through. So I know the work that goes into doing that. It's formidable, but we're moving those definitely in the right direction.
And one thing which I think is worth mentioning, because it does come back to the very point that Councillor Booth was mentioning before, we are not maximising our income from these premises. We could get more money. We don't, because there are other considerations that we've got in terms of economic growth and supporting the businesses which are already there. So we're very aware of this, which is why the variety of rents is put in, and to be quite honest, even within that, a degree of flexibility is possible as well. So yes, we are aware of that, and I'd just like to add to the comment just made by Peter. Our head of property has more than proved his worth.
At our pre-meeting, I did inquire about whether we could hire out further facilities here in Fenland Hall, and Amy gave me plenty of reasons why we couldn't do that. But whether you've had thoughts on that at all, about future hiring out of facilities here?
Well, as far as the council chamber, we don't currently offer it out for functions, but that will be considered as part of the accommodation review. But any out of normal office hours usage would almost certainly incur additional staff costs to open and close the building, and there'd be confidentiality and security risks which need to be assessed. And so I don't want to preempt what will come out of the accommodation review, but if it does happen, I don't believe that it will produce any material amount of money. I'm not against it in principle, but I wouldn't expect that it would significantly affect our outcome.
Thank you. If there are no further comments or questions, I thank you all for being here today, and the reports on fees and charges 2023-24 are noted. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So is it because of that particular date then, or is it because obviously he's been signed off at the moment, isn't it? Is that the reason that he won't be able to attend?
Yeah, that's the reason. I mean, we've been in ongoing dialogue with his office, and they themselves have suggested that we put the date in the diary. So that if there's any chance at all that they are able to attend, they will. So that's how we've had to leave it. So, you know, so far as the CPCA can facilitate this, they are making every effort to do so. But of course, there's unknown variables that will affect that. But they're trying to work with us to make sure it happens if it can.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, I was just going to say, you know, if it means that to see the mayor, we need to change the date of the meeting, then I don't think we should be afraid to. But I mean, obviously, we need to make sure he's in good health and, you know, and he recovers. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I've got to admit, I'm disappointed on a number of fronts here. One, the presentation that we had from the CPCA last year referenced skills, the opportunities that they were creating, and when we burrowed down into the figures, the actual opportunities they were giving or achieving within Fenland were minuscule, to put it mildly. And I've not seen any effort from them to actually rectify that or come back to this committee to actually give an indication of what they're doing to address that problem. That's one. The other thing that I'm a little bit disappointed in, and if it is true, I do think as a council we should be passing comment, is the likelihood that the CPCA might be putting an inclusion within the council tax bill that they're going to present to all residents within Cambridgeshire.
I think Councillor Scalloway's coming back.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I sit on the overview and scrutiny for the CPCA as Fenland's representative. On the first count of the precepts, we actually had a budget analysis meeting last Monday, which ended in chaos because they never produced any figures. They fudged around the points and basically it was sent back to them and said, this report is not good enough. What they intend to do from then onwards, I don't know. On the skills cycle, I am one of the two lead members with Andy Coles from Peterborough on the skills section of overview and scrutiny. We had a meeting with Fliss, who's the head of the Department for Skills, and we castigated them on their content of their report at the previous meeting of the overview and scrutiny meeting at CPCA. She accepted the criticism that the report had been produced in a hurry and was not inclusive, but they are attempting to correct that. Andy and I intend to have another meeting with the various people, including visiting some of their boot camps, which they've organised, which nobody seemed to know anything about, where they were held, who was holding them, or anything like that. None of the information coming forward, but they do intend to update that to both Andy and myself. And as soon as I get an update, this committee will get an update as well.
Thank you very much. Right, Councillor Booth.
I mean, I think on the basis of what we said, the future work programme is probably appropriate. My only observation is if we do have, was it 4 or 5 items on the 27th, that would be a long meeting. So it sounds like we're not likely to. So, but my preference is, you know, if it comes to it, would be to get the combined authority here over some of the other matters, because I think the impact that can have. The other thing is we've had the dates come through on Friday for the task and finish group. So I've had a look at those. I think I can make most of those days. I haven't put them in my diary yet because I thought we maybe have a bit of discussion now. But what I would say is probably try and avoid April because I think everyone's going to be busy. And I think we are out of it. The way I read it, we only need 4 sessions out of all the ones that have been provided. Is that correct, Amy?
The data is obviously being collated between members and officers at the moment. So as soon as we've had all that feedback, we'll set them in stone. But obviously I'll take back your feedback from today.
Yeah, I handed my list of the dates to Linda today. One comment I wish to make, on the 20th of February, which is 7 days before the meeting, our pre-panel meeting at 2 o'clock is the same as, I know it's a Zoom meeting, but it's the same day as full council. So we might have to revise that to the following day, because that will be a very busy day for myself, Amy, and various other officers. So the pre-meet on the 20th may have to be rescheduled to the following day. And I hadn't discussed that with the chairman yet, because I only realised it when we was filling out the document with Linda earlier.
Yeah, thank you. I hadn't realised either. So thanks very much for that. I think that'll be a good suggestion. Somewhere else. Right. Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. Anything else on the future work programme? No.
Can I just ask a question on that? It's just something that's basically just picking my brains, what have you. There's councillor saying a moment ago about I think we're all really a little bit busy in April. Isn't that something called PERDA? Is that the PERDA thing where you're not allowed to have meetings anyway?
Yeah.
Not allowed to have decisions.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
right.
No.
Yeah, but I haven't heard of it until just, well, obviously I hadn't sort of heard of PERDA till recently. I'm basically trying to sort of get my brain around the fact that we're being PERDA, therefore we couldn't do anything about it anyway. That was, so maybe Amy could sort of like listen on that.
Yeah. Okay.
I think there's quite detailed guidance on PERDA, so you know there are aspects of business that can continue as normal, but it's obviously ensuring that that business doesn't create certain platforms. So it's not a simple matter of no, we can't have meetings, or yes, we can. A lot of thought and detail goes into deciding what can go on, but as Councillor Bede said, not making any decisions or publicising those discussions within that period. But in either event, is a significantly busy time for everyone's calendars, so we will try and work with that.
Okay. Nothing else remains. Item 10, items which the chairman has under item 3 deemed urgent. There weren't any. So I thank you all for your attendance today, and I'll formally close the meeting at 4:07 PM. Thank you.